Hi, dear friends. My name is Ospino, and I am a professor of theology and religious education at Boston College School of Theology and Ministry. I recently had the privilege of overseeing, as the principal investigator, a couple of national studies on Latino Catholics, Hispanic Catholics in the United States. The first major study is the National Study of Catholic Parishes with Hispanic Ministry. In the United States of America, there are about 4,500 parishes, that serve Latino Catholics in various ways, primarily offering services in Spanish, but also serving their children who are mostly and primarily English speaking in many cases. The second study is a study that I had a chance to do advance with my colleague from the Roach Center for Catholic Education, Dr. Patricia Waitzel O'Neill, and it's called the National Survey of Catholic Schools Serving Hispanic Families. This is a study of 1,488 schools that were invited to participate. And the goal was to identify those schools nationwide that are serving Hispanic Catholics intentionally, whether in large numbers or maybe in small communities, but at least that intentionally are making efforts to reach out to the Latino community. So let me just give you an overview in the next 20 minutes of why we as Catholic educators need to be attentive to this reality of Catholic schools and Hispanic families. We know that the Catholic Church in the United States is significantly undergoing major transformations, demographic transformations, cultural transformations, linguistic transformations. And at the heart of those transformations is the Hispanic community. So if we were to go back in history, say to 1950, 1960s, the vast majority of Catholics in this country were Euro-American white, the children and grandchildren, great-grandchildren of European immigrants. So those immigrants who were from Italy, from Ireland, from Germany, who settled in the United States and settled in national churches, speaking their own language, sustaining and maintaining their own culture, by the middle of the 20th century had almost fully integrated into the US culture, were mostly Euro-American white, and pretty much, nobody's talked that much about the Italian Catholics or the Irish Catholics, but everybody talked about American Catholics. So that population, in many ways, has remained, but the younger ones, the children, unfortunately have not kept up with the growth of Catholicism, at least on the part of Euro-American Catholicism. But there are other groups that have been arriving in the United States and growing that are actually injecting new life to the Catholic Church in the United States. Two of those big groups are Hispanics on the one hand and Asians. But Hispanics is perhaps the group that has most impacted the growth of Catholicism in this country since the 1960s. Just to give you a sense, since the year 1960 until today, Hispanics have represented or constituted about 71% of the growth of Catholicism in the United States, which is amazing. But at the same time, Asians constitute the fastest growing group in the Catholic Church in the United States. We don't see the impact of Asians at the national level, especially because they are a small group, about 5% of all Catholics in this country share an Asian background. 70% of all Asians who are Catholic in this country are immigrants. So it's still a small group, still a more recent group, but it's going to significantly make a difference in the decades to come. Right now, the group that's making the big difference are Hispanic Catholics. 40 to 43%, perhaps more, of all Catholics in the United States of America are Hispanic, share a Hispanic background. Now, when we think of Hispanics, the first thing that we imagine is the regular immigrant from Mexico, from the Dominican Republic, from Colombia, from Venezuela, who arrives in the United States with little English, perhaps struggling with poverty and maybe a lack of documents. We know that millions of Latinos unfortunately do not have legal documents to reside in the United States, yet they are still raising their families and working hard, contributing to the US society, because at the end of the day they took all those risks, pretty much to have a better life and to build a better future for their own families. So that's kind of the image that we have. And as a matter of fact, the vast majority of services that the Catholic Church offers to Hispanic Catholics are geared primarily, precisely to this immigrant community. About 99% of all the efforts that the Catholic Church does in the United States to serve Hispanic Catholics are primarily oriented towards the service and pastoral care of immigrants. But what sometimes gets lost in the process is the fact that 2/3 of Latinos are U.S. born, are citizens of the United States. No, what it also gets lost is the fact that the vast majority of Latinos are English speaking. And another fact that gets lost in this process is the also fact that Latinos are a very young population. No, the average age of Latinos in the United States, Hispanics, is 28. That means that about 40% of the entire Hispanic population is younger than 22 years old, which brings us precisely to the topic of this brief presentation. So we know that Latinos are very young, and Latino Catholics, by and large, are very young and are having large families. I mean, we consider a large family 3 or 4 children today. I mean, if we were maybe a century ago, we would be talking about 12 or 15 children. But that has changed significantly. In any case, so we know there is a very young population, and Latinos, as a matter of fact, are contributing not only their work and their traditions and not only their energy, but also the children to the Catholic Church. In every parish, in the vast majority of parishes with Hispanic ministry, 2/3 of baptisms are Hispanic children. The majority of first communions and confirmations are Hispanic children. And that really says a lot, so the energy, where the energy is coming. Now, if we were to put together the entire Catholic population in this country, in the United States, that is under the age of 18 in one single room or one single place, we will realize that about 60%, 6 out of 10 Catholic children younger than 18 are Hispanic. And that immediately sends us into a quest to imagine how is it that we are serving the Hispanic community, particularly the young. Most of these children under the age of 18 are born and are being raised in the United States of America. 93% of children, Hispanic children under 18, are US born, citizens of the country. They are growing up, perhaps most likely, in families that have at least one parent who is an immigrant, or the 2 parents, maybe another set of adults. But these kids are growing up in the States. They speak English. They are being educated in our public school system and so forth. So as they are educated, as they grow up in the country, one of the first questions that we need to ask as Catholics and as pastors, bishops, sisters, deacons, but particularly as Catholic educators, how are we serving this next generation of Catholics through our Catholic schools? And the answer right now is, well, not that well, not that well. And that's exactly why we need to be having these conversations. So part of the research that I have been doing is to kind of get a sense of how the structures of the church, parishes and educational institutions are actually meeting the needs, And it's fascinating to realize that in many parts of our geography, even though we are aware of the Hispanic presence, no, many of the structures in the Catholic Church in many places actually function as if Latinos either were not Catholic or were not around, no? And that's actually that's not benefiting anybody. That's not benefiting, it's not benefiting the Hispanic community, it's not benefiting Catholic schools, and it's not benefiting the church as a whole. I mean, if we define the church as the community of those who are baptized, disciples of Jesus Christ, well, we need to realize that it doesn't matter the skin color or the language or the culture or the legal status, At the end of the day, what matters is that all the baptized need to be educated, and all they need to be introduced to the faith and nurtured in the faith. And Catholic schools have proven to be one of the best vehicles precisely to do this kind of work. So we are not doing that well in terms of how our schools are serving Hispanic Catholics. No, so let's go back to this 60% of Catholics who are under 18 who are Hispanic. Let's just put a number so we will understand the magnitude of this reality. That 60%, now we're talking about more than 12 million children, okay? And if we take only those who are school age, say around the age of 5, all the way to 17, that's 8 million. Precisely the populations that our Catholic schools, that the majority of elementary and secondary Catholic schools are serving. 8 million Hispanic Catholic children are in the United States of America. I'm going to share with you a slide from a presentation that I did a few months ago. And by now you can see this slide. And in this slide, which is entitled Comparing Hispanic Enrollment in Catholic Schools with the Catholic School Age Population. So we know that in the country there are 14.6 million school-age Catholics, children from the ages of 4, 5, all the way to 17. 8 million of those, as I said earlier, are actually Hispanic, but barely 3,007 are enrolled in Catholic schools. Okay, so that really says a lot. When we start looking at these particular numbers, look at the vast population, the number of Latinos, which is about 60%, and then the very small number. And that is exactly what we are trying to attempt to raise awareness as we move in the process of looking at how we can better serve Latinos. Now, one would imagine, with so many Catholic children, why are we closing Catholic schools in the United States? And that's a very important question to ask, no? On the one hand, we know that we have lost more than 7,000 Catholic schools since the 1960s. 7,000 schools. That's more Catholic schools than have ever been built in almost most of Latin America, just to give you a sense. We have lost also 7,000 parishes precisely at a time when Latinos are becoming the majority. But most of those schools in most of those parishes have been closed in the regions of the country where the first generation of Catholic immigrants settled, which was the Northeast and the Midwest. Those are the main places where these Catholics actually built these schools and universities and parishes and thrived significantly. It's an amazing experiment, your American Catholics actually, accomplished in many ways what anybody would call the American dream. Many came with very little, and then they built an entire network of schools, parishes, hospitals, universities, and eventually, ended up becoming the largest church Christian community in this particular country. But as Hispanics and also Asians, become now the main force of growth of Catholicism in the United States, actually they are not. Most of them are not settling in the Northeast or the Midwest, even though millions of Hispanics live in those two regions. So we should not even attempt to close a Catholic school. So, but the majority of them are settling in the South and the West. And what happens is that the Catholic Church, in the South and the West, did not develop major networks of structures like hospitals and parishes to serve Catholics. So now we are at a time, and which is fascinating. On the one hand, we got in the Northeast, the Midwest, lots of structures, fewer Catholics, and Latinos are not still fully integrated into that experience, as well as Asians and immigrants from Africa and other parts of the world. And then in the South, we got tons of Latinos, millions of Latinos. Most of Hispanics, as a matter of fact, live in the South and the West. Most Asians live in the South and the West. And then what happens is that we do not have the structures. So at some point, we need to do a little bit of rebalancing of resources. And while in the Northeast, we need to figure out ways to how welcoming Latinos and Asians and other children of immigrants, and grandchildren of immigrants. In the South and the West, we need to continue to open the doors to the schools or to the children. The doors of the schools to the children that are already there, and we need to start building new schools, new parishes, and ideally new universities and centers of support. So this is a time that is a unique time for evangelization. So in our study on Catholic schools and Hispanic families, we were wondering, okay, what is it that makes a Catholic school a welcoming place? There's a lot of energy nationwide about school enrollment. If you're a principal, if you are maybe a development person in a Catholic school, if you're a teacher, most likely the conversation centers on, well, how do we keep the school open? How do we keep it thriving, of course? And at the same time, how do we enroll more children and more families that support that support the Catholic schools? Well, Hispanics, in many places do not become the first target for enrollment of Catholic schools, because we know that Catholic education is expensive. It costs, gone are the days when we had a large number of sisters who would work for free or for very little, and they would keep the schools going, and then parishes supported Catholic schools, and everybody, would contribute something, and there were all these resources. The economic model has changed, but also the ecclesial model has changed. We switched all in about 60 years from having 98% sisters teaching in Catholic schools and about 2% lay women and men, to actually inversely the opposite. About 98% of lay women and men teaching in Catholic schools and being administrators, and barely 2%, and the number keeps going down, of sisters, brothers, and priests teaching in these institutions. So we are at a different time. And then we need to figure out a way, okay, if Latinos are not the first target, so how can we serve this large population? How can we be faithful to the reason or to the main goals for which Catholic schools were created? They were created to educate Catholics in the first place, They were created to help Catholics to stay in the faith, and certainly to as participant, in the larger society, U.S. citizen. So the schools really helped with that. We also know that in certain parts of the country where there were a lot of numbers of non-Catholics, Catholic schools opened their doors in a very excellent way, in an ecumenical effort, sometimes interreligious effort, to serve the needs of those who were most in need. No, but we cannot forget that the community that is needing the most right now, the Catholic schools, are our own sisters and brothers who are children, who are school age. How do we help them? How do we engage these Hispanic families? So as we asked in our survey, and I want to invite you to look at the study, which is available online. If you go to the Boston College website, just look for the Roche Center for Catholic Education, and then you are going to find a link there, that will take you to the report, and will give you all sorts of statistics and analysis, which is very good, and it's also accessible. One of our goals is to produce quality research, but at the same time to produce it and present it in a way that is accessible to as many people as possible. So we asked people, we asked Catholic schools, what are you doing? And the schools that seem to be more successful, in serving Hispanic families, are the schools that, yes, are doing recruitment. We need to recruit Latinos, of course, but recruitment is not enough. No, what makes a school really an excellent place, for Latino families and grow as Latino families find themselves in there, is the creation of an environment that supports culture and even language and religious traditions that sustain the lives and the experience of Hispanic Catholics. So how do you develop this? Well, include the language. It is okay to use Spanish. It is okay to incorporate Spanish. One of the best examples that we have right now of the best models for Catholic schools serving Hispanic families are the so-called two-way immersion programs, and as a matter of fact, Boston College, leads one of the largest networks of bilingual programs, two-way immersion programs, English and Spanish, but not only English and Spanish, also Mandarin and English, and a few other options. So we got models to do that. So including the language, incorporating the culture, value the culture of the children, value the culture of the families. It is important. The worst that can happen to anyone is that someone says your culture is useless or worthless. No, that really goes to the heart of who we are. Same thing with language or our religious traditions. Schools that incorporate services in Spanish, masses, or schools that incorporate prayer moments in Spanish, are schools that are very effective as well incorporating families. At the end of the day, what did we learn from this study? That we need people in these schools, teachers, administrators with intercultural competencies, people who appreciate diversity, who are not afraid of diversity, and also who want to engage the Latino community. It requires a major level of intentionality. We also discovered that, if parents see themselves appreciated and welcomed in these schools, not only they support the schools and the education of their children, but they get involved. And that's the future. That's how Euro-American parents have done it. That's how they did it, many years ago, and that's how we continue to do it. So I think I'm going to stop here because my time is short. But I want to invite you into a reflection about this and this conversation. And my hope is that in the future, we perhaps might be able to engage in a more in-depth conversation. Again, Boston College, Hostman Ospino, and you can Google me, and you will find information, access to all these reports on the Boston College website, and also to the access to the report on Catholic schools and Hispanic families, available through the Roach Center for Catholic Education at Boston College. God bless you, and may God guide you in your excellent ministry as Catholic educators. Blessings.